Stop training your lower back like your biceps. What does that mean? That's what we're going to be talking about in this tutorial. We're going to be talking about 4 exercises that you can start doing instead. But what we first of all got to do is explain what is training your lower back like your biceps. If you want to start building your lower back strength endurance and start training your lower back properly, please do hit the link below. Go through to my How to Build Low Back Strength Endurance 12-week program and you can get started today. Okay, so let's talk about some arm exercises and what this concept is about that I'm talking about. Well, basically, a couple of dumbbells here, and the exercise is the bicep curl. Now, this is how a lot of people are training their lower back, and we're going to talk about why this is a problem after we've explained the exercises. So, as you can see, with this bicep curl, I am shortening the bicep, and now I'm lengthening the bicep. Now that is a common type of exercise. Now with the limbs, it's really not a problem. We could go triceps, like so. So shortening, or let's say shortening and lengthening of the muscle. Now, as I've mentioned, for the limbs, that's not a problem. So for the biceps, for the triceps, in some respects for the deltoids as well, for the quads, for the hamstrings, for the glutes, for the calf muscle, it's really not too much of a problem. But when it comes to the spinal muscles, it becomes a problem. So what is a bicep curl for the lower back? Well, very simply, it's a back extension. So that could be off the floor, it could be off a machine like this. Now again, this is a machine I do not use for back extensions, I use for something else. But essentially, the back extension is shortening of a muscle and lengthening of a muscle for the lower back muscle, for the erector spinae group. So what we're doing is essentially, it's that bicep curl, so that shortening and lengthening of the muscle for the lower back. Now what we need to understand is, why is that a problem? Number one, if we just look at the design of the core muscles, they are there to prevent movement, not produce it. Or their primary role is to prevent movement, not produce it. So if we take that as the design of the core muscles, if we then look at the limb muscles, it essentially flips. So the primary role of the limb muscles, the quads, the hamstrings, the biceps, the triceps, they are there to produce movement. The core then is there to transfer the produced movement. So we produce movement at the legs, let's say, when we're gonna do a sprint, for example. So we go to do the sprint, we're there, it's the glutes, it's the quads, it's the hamstrings that are producing that movement. The hamstrings do have other roles, and that's not for this tutorial, but we're just going to say a part of their role is to produce movement. So what the core is then there to do is to transfer that movement. So we want all that sort of power from the legs to be transferred and go out of the foot. So what we need the core to do is to be rock solid. So it essentially, when the force is produced, it gets pushed or kept in the legs by the core by preventing movement of the torso. Yes, there is going to be some movement of the torso because you've got the arms moving and we're sort of elasticating the torso to act like a spring. But what we don't want is excessive movement, because what we then get is what's called energy leaks. So, number one, the torso is there to prevent movement, or the muscles of the torso are there to prevent movement, so we can use the movement from the limbs. Number two is to prevent what's called anterior shear. So when we lift with a rounded spine, that essentially shuts down the low back muscles. What then wants to happen is there is a force called anterior shear. So if it's the front of my vertebra, that force is pulling that vertebra forward. It's not going to fall off the front, but the force is pulling it forward as if it could, let's say. When we are in the neutral position, that force is neutralized. So we've got the force wanting to pull it forward, we've got the back muscles holding it in place, and that then becomes a stable spine. When we extend the spine, it then obviously creates a posterior force and it's pulling it backwards, which is again not what we want, because we want to maintain that neutral force, or we want to neutralize the force. So we've got the rounding of the spine, which is the anterior shear. We've got the neutral spine, which is maintaining or neutralizing that force. So when we go into back extensions where we're rounding the spine and overextending the spine, we are working against that principle. So when we go into the neutral posture, so this is what we're trying to look for, is exercises that maintain the neutral posture but activate the lower back muscles. If we can do that, we've then started to find more productive exercises for the lower back. Number 3 is the stability of the spine. So again, if we were lifting something off the floor, if we were coming into this position, we brace the abdominals, we keep the spine in a neutral position. We've got active muscles here, we've got active muscles here. That is essentially locking the spine down onto the pelvis, which is going to bring stability to the spine. So this is why we don't want to be bringing in movement, because if we bring in movement, what we're doing is we are sort of tightening muscles on the front, slackening muscles on the back. We're tightening muscles at the back, we're slackening muscles at the front. Now all this is creating instability, and as I've talked about before, anterior shear, and going against the concept and the principle that the core muscles are there to prevent movement. So what we're doing is we're going against, first of all, that concept, and then we're allowing energy leaks, or the chances of energy leaks, to be increased. So what we need to be able to do is, as I've mentioned before, we need to find exercises that maintain this neutral posture, like so, which will then activate the muscles, but also keep the spine healthy. And number 4, which is essentially what comes if we move our spine too much and under too much load, which could be, if we're in flexion, we increase the risk of disc herniations. If we're in extension, we increase the risk of facet joint irritation, which again, both of these can create pain. Obviously the disc herniation can then lead on to irritating nerves, which can then lead on to sciatic symptoms, muscle tightness, muscle imbalance, so on and so forth. When we maintain the neutral posture and maintain the proper position of the spine, we are going to be much more effective at maintaining a proper position, using the muscles as they were built to be used, minimizing risk of energy leaks for performance, and then essentially creating a healthier spine, which then allows for greater fitness, because we're not at increased risk of injury, which is essentially going to bring us back down the fitness ladder, if you will, and keep us sort of 1 step forward, 2 steps back type of scenario. We can keep taking that 1 step forward without the 2 steps back of the injury. So what are these exercises? Number 1 is the deadlift. It's a great exercise, but it does depend on a number of factors. Do you have the range of movement in the hips to be able to perform it correctly? You can add a little bit more of a knee bend to get a bit more of a squat going, which is absolutely fine. So that can be helpful, but we need the range of movement of the hips. So as we go down, what we don't do is round the spine. Now, why is this such a great exercise? Well, although it's a dynamic exercise and a more complex exercise, we're going to be doing it every day anyway, because we've got to lift things and carry things around. So we need to be somewhat competent at it, no matter the range of movement that we have. Plus, the spine maintains its neutral posture, and the torso is preventing movement. So as we come down into this position, we get to here, we've got the position of the torso that we want, we then lift. So the movement is done from the hips, using the glutes, not from the spine. So as we go down, that position is maintained throughout. So essentially, it's an isometric contraction, which is a static contraction, which is what the core is best at, of this. Because if I come down and I bend my spine, there is an energy leak. Because what's going to happen is I've not gone anywhere, but but my spine has rounded. So as soon as then that weight starts to be lifted, there is the unnecessary additional stress to the spine, causing it a problem. So exercise number 1 is the deadlift. Exercise number 2 is the bird dog. When we come down into the bird dog, we're on all fours. So this is probably the least stress on the spine you could have, which is in this position, because the spine is essentially just hanging. There's not a great deal of stress on it. But what happens is as I lift an arm, you can feel muscles start to activate. As I lift a leg, again, you can feel muscles start to activate. As I alternate the legs, the activation changes sides. As I lift the other arm, activation switches sides. So as I'm switching sides, you get different activation, you get contraction, you get relaxation, but the spine maintains position. Obviously the bird dog is doing both at the same time, and it's key that when you do this exercise, you don't extend the spine and flex the spine. So as you lift, you're not lifting like so, you are essentially pushing the heel and the hand, so the hand goes forward and the heel goes backwards. And that will maintain you the position of the spine whilst extending the hip, and then you get the activation of the muscle from one side to the other. If you want a little bit more activation, grab a dumbbell. Obviously you can have 2 dumbbells, but there is a little bit more activation through the arm, obviously it doesn't need to be 4 kilos, could be 1, 2, 3 kilos, could be heavier, who knows. But then you just get more activation in that static position or in that static posture. So exercise number 2 is the bird dog. Exercise number 3 is the plank. Plank is a very good exercise. Hold for a long period of time if necessary. Come down into this position, and then because we've got that long lever from the elbow to the toes, what we've got is the abdominals required to work and the erector spinae group required to work. Again, what we can do is we can lift limbs up, which is going to get that extra activation. So the plank, certainly with any limb lifting, is a step on from the bird dog, which is the limb lifting, because there's going to be, in this position, because there's more activation, there's more load on the spine, but if we lift a limb, there's only going to be more load going on the spine. And again, as we move each limb, that load is going to be transferred around, which is another important concept for the lower back. So what we need to be able to do is, again, maintain the position, hold the posture, hold it for a period of time first, so we've got the endurance and the strength, and then we can start lifting a limb, which is then going to build the stability as well. Exercise number 4 is the single leg hip thrust. Again, what we're trying to do here is isolate a glute, which again is transferring the load from one side to the other, but we're trying again to keep it away from the spine and onto the hips. So what we need to be able to do in this position is, first of all, come up. Now you could do this from the floor if you so wish. I'm just going to do it from a bench for this time. So what we do is we come into this position, feet and knees together. We can then hug the knee. Chin to chest, down we go, and up we come. Again, all the time, very similar to the deadlift. We're hinging from the hip, maintaining proper posture of the spine all the way through the movement, keeping the chin tucked to the chest, minimizing stress on the neck, but we're getting the glute activation. There will be erector spinae activation depending on the leg that's up or down, which is then again maintaining that proper posture, getting the activation, so we're starting to get much more effective exercises whilst also minimizing stress to the spine, but building the core muscles as they were designed to be built. If you've liked this video, please do hit the like and the thanks button below. If you have a comment or a question about anything that's come up in this tutorial, hit that in the comment section below. And if you want to watch more videos like this, hit the subscribe and the bell icon, and you'll be notified when my next video is released.